if we kept going like this, we'd never make our deadline. And, I was paying for the location. It was a huge mansion. And I got a great deal on it. But yeah, so I called her up and I said, thank you for your time and thank you for contributing, but we're going to go another way and I'm going to have to replace you.
What's going on, everybody? Rob Mabry here, writer, director, and producer of The Legend of El Chupacabra. This is the Texas Indie Film Podcast, and today I have with me Peter Hyoguchi. Peter is a director, an independent filmmaker. He is the CEO of Ronin Films, a production house, and a working director specializing mostly in commercials, I think, Peter. But hey, it's great to have you on the show. Terrific to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet, Peter. So we have a little bit of history. You did the visual effects for my film, The Legend of El Chupacabra. I know that is a passion of yours, visual effects. But talk to me a little bit about how you became a filmmaker and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be born in Hollywood. Um, we lived in West Hollywood. My mom and my dad, and my mom was in the film industry, so she was one of the animators on Scooby Doo and the Flintstones. She worked at a company called Hanna-Barbera, and
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
not everyone knows about it, but
That
it's
was like, my whole life when I was a kid, Scooby-Doo and
yeah.
the Flintstones. So that's cool. I'm sure that I have seen a lot of your mom's work.
Yeah, they also did a lot of commercials. So she did the Kool-Aid Man commercials. They would shoot a live action man in a suit with no face, and then she would it's called rotoscoping. She would draw the face and he would say, "Oh yeah." So she would draw that. And so she did a bunch of those commercials um and then, I loved cartoons growing up um and I knew that my mom made cartoons, and so I really wanted to do that. I wanted to learn how to make my own cartoons, and so she was really patient with me, and told me that, and before I could run, I had to walk. I had to learn how to draw, just drawing from perspective. Um, like a face like this, and then a face like this, and then all the faces between here and there, and and how light makes shadows and perspective and all of that. So we would draw a lot. That was like my sort of growing up was drawing with my mom. So we'd go somewhere and draw a tree together. So she would draw the same tree, I would draw the same tree, and then she would kind of critique me on how to get better. And that was huge, you know, opportunity to learn about art and graphics and all of that early on. And then art history, we go to museums and things like that. So I got a real education in art from her. And then I was making cartoons by the time I was 10. So I would make flip books. And so yeah, and then we moved to Marin County um in 1977. So I was 5 years old, and we we moved to Marin, right next to George Lucas's kingdom, and everyone I knew was kind of related to the the Lucasfilm and ILM and all of that, and so um, one of my best friends in elementary school, his dad ran ILM, and so I would go play with him at his house, and he would have like miniatures. His dad ran the model shop, so he made all the X-wing fighters and TIE fighters and stuff like that. And there would be Star Wars ships at the house, and
What a life, Peter. That's crazy.
yeah, really super lucky because I was a Star Wars nut,
Oh, I
and
can't imagine.
and so at the height of Lucasfilm's sort of dominance, I was like right there, and then I went to church on Sundays. I'd go to Sunday school, and my Sunday school teacher was the head of the matte department at Industrial Light and Magic, and he did some of the most famous shots, like when ET looks over the city and those lights and everything. He like
Hmm.
moves, and we see that's a matte painting by Chris Evans. And so many shots in Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones, and all of those Lucasfilm, even other films that weren't Lucasfilm movies. There were just a ton of high-end Hollywood films that would do their visual effects at Industrial Light and Magic, and so Chris would be doing them. And because I was already kind of like a wonderkin, I was making cartoons and everything. I was given access in multiple ways to Lucasfilm and ILM and Skywalker Ranch and all of that, and so I was really hungry to learn, and they were happy to teach me. I already had sort of an understanding of animation and rotoscoping and certain filmmaking techniques I had kind of already known. So they kind of just brought me to this other level. They would teach me how matte paintings worked and how the optical printer works, and how I was shown how they made the Rancor. I had a conversation one time with Phil Tippett, who allowed me to puppet the Rancor from Return of the Jedi, and how the hands would work with the bicycle cables, and
Yeah.
they were just using kind of like a lot of like spit and bubble gum and whatever to make these things happen, and but they were the best in the world. And so learning those techniques directly from those masters at such a young age. And also I was just obsessed with film and illusion and visual effects, and I just wanted to know everything. And that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. I mean, that was just, no one was telling me you can't do it. Because my mom, made cartoons for a living, and my Sunday school teacher made E.T. and Return of the
Yeah.
Jedi. And so, and one of my best friends, his dad made X-Wing fighters. And so it was like so doable. So, I think people who grow up outside the business think it's like impossible. But just having the access um, to uh, to those incredible, artists, and them showing me sort of the secret knowledge. I mean, it's trade. It's just like anything else.
Yeah, it's funny, even though we think of, George Lucas, Industrial Light and Magic, and Star Wars, right, as they're obviously these huge Hollywood blockbusters. But, when George Lucas started, it in a lot of ways it sort of was an indie, filmmaking venture, and they were doing these things that nobody else had ever done before, and a lot of
Yeah,
people didn't believe in it. And innovating and inventing it as they went along. So that must have been just a tremendous playground, to be able to take advantage of.
it was. Yeah, it was surreal to be able to hold a lightsaber, the one that Luke Skywalker held, and touch the Death Star, and you know, it was incredibly. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky. You know,
Yeah.
um, And then we moved back to LA area when I was 13. And I was already making little movies, and I was obsessed with making, being a director. And the only problem was we didn't have any money. So even though I had this access and this knowledge that was given to me, my mom and dad divorced. My dad's Japanese. He moved back to Japan. So I didn't really see him until in my 20s. And yeah, I had brief encounters with my dad, but he had started another family, and we never got child support. And my mom lost her job as an animator, so she became a secretary.
Mhm.
So it was just me and my mom, secretary. We were sort of like lower middle class, and so I didn't have enough money to make movies or have my own video camera. I remember my dad did visit um, when I was 15, and I told him that I wouldn't, I wouldn't meet with him unless he bought me a video camera. And and
the
so
the hard sell, huh?
yeah, I was really like upset that he didn't help us out or anything like that. So I was like, if you're gonna
Yeah.
if you want to meet me, you're gonna have to. And I had one that would I had there was a video store that I would go to after school, and it was this beautiful Sony. Um, it was they called it a Pro, but it was a mini DV. No, no, it was high eight.
I8 maybe. There you go.
But it
Okay.
was anyway, it was an early video camera, and they called it a Pro because you could actually do manual focus and manual zoom and everything. But it was a home video camera, and we couldn't afford it. And I used to go over there and ask the employees to like take it out of the jewel case and let me hold it and play with it. And to the point, it was just obnoxious, you know.
Oh God,
And
this
I was
kid
there.
again.
Yeah. And then also they rented videos there. So I was there every day renting 5 movies a day. And I was just movie obsessed. And then one day my dad came from Japan to visit, and we walked up to that jewel case, and I was like, I want that. And they couldn't believe it. They could not believe that I was actually going to buy the video camera. So we bought the video camera, and then I was just making movies just nonstop. Um, and then about a year later, I entered the George Lucas's youth film festival, and it was 18 and under, and I won the film festival. And then I
Nice.
got to fly back to Marin and go back to ILM and meet all the people that I knew already. But at this time I would be an award-winning filmmaker, and they interviewed me, and they put the winners. It was 5 winners, and made it into like an hour-long special, and they aired it on PBS. And I was
Oh,
interviewed in
cool.
the local newspaper, and I was only 15. You know, it was just a crazy, heady experience.
Yeah,
Met
that must have
George
been very
Lucas.
exciting.
Yeah, but it also sort of like it gave me the validation, like, yes, you know, you can be a professional film director. And then after that, I had a friend who had very rich parents, and they really liked the fact that I would make movies with their son, because I wasn't drinking or doing alcohol or partying. I was a super nerd, so I was just making movies. So they're like, "Yes, make movies with our son. That would be great. We'll pay you whatever you want, you know." And so then I put together a prospectus, and I asked for a grant, and I got $30,000 from them. And at that point, I was only making $20 a week. That was my allowance, $20 a week, and I didn't have a bank account. And so I didn't $30,000 was like $1 million or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I ended up making my first feature film, and um did that when I was 17.
And what film was that?
That was No Exit. I had in high school, I was assigned this in world literature. I was assigned this play by Jean-Paul Sartre called No Exit. It all takes place in one room, hell, and that's the whole idea. Is hell is other people's. Three people have died, and they'll never get along, and it's just this kind of mansion parlor room. And I just thought it would make a good movie. It was sort of like a long Twilight Zone episode, which was my favorite show, still is my favorite show. And so I just shot the play, you know, as a movie, as an exercise. And um and so that was a really great experience. I mean, I was 19 when I finished it, and my mom allowed me to drop out of high school to work on it full time. So I don't have a high school diploma, but I have a feature film that I did.
Peter, you slacker. So did you shoot that on the same camera that your dad bought
No,
you,
no,
or?
I had a friend who he had a 3/4 inch video camera, and he would shoot things for the news, for the local news. And so and then I had another friend who was the manager of a camera shop, and they had lights and light stands and things like that. And we would steal the equipment, bring it back the next morning. But um, so that we were kind of using borrowed equipment, and then his camera. So it's 3/4 inch videotape, and it was, I didn't know what I was doing really. I mean, it was a pretty bad movie, but it taught me how to schedule and plan a film. I was, the youngest kid on the set. Everyone's in their 20s or 30s, and I'm the boss, and I'm writing the checks. And it was, I had to fire an actress halfway through shooting, and
Yeah,
that
well,
was really difficult.
I'm curious as to what that was like, right? Because you're a kid,
Yeah.
you've got a crew of adults. They probably have more experience than you had at that
Yeah.
point. Like, how did you manage the set, and what did you learn through that process?
I realized that in order for me to be a good boss, I needed to be um, prepared and always on time, and also do everything. I noticed that like I would lose respect for my bosses that wouldn't keep their word, or my
Mhm.
teachers, like people who wouldn't keep their word drove me crazy. Any kind of authority figure that doesn't keep their word um, is you just lose respect for them. And so I just made sure that I was just always on time. And if I said I was going to do something, I would do it. And if I couldn't do it, I would apologize and explain why I couldn't do it. And um, so I just lead by example. And I had an actress who wouldn't take direction and who would be late. And being late drives me crazy because it's just the ultimate fuck you to everybody on set. It's like you're taking someone's like time. We can never get back time. Giving someone's time to somebody is like you're giving a piece of value that you can never, you can give money away and then get it back later, but you can never give time and then get time back. Like we're only on this one, you know, there's an afterlife, I believe, but in this world, there's just a finite amount of time. And
Yep.
if you take up someone's time recklessly, just to sort of prove that you're more important than someone else, or just that you don't care about their time, that your time is more valuable than someone else's time. And this actress did this more than once. She was in her 30s, and and it was like this. It was very difficult to come to the realization that if we kept going like this, we'd never make our deadline. And I was paying for the location. It was a huge mansion, and I got a great deal on it. But yeah, so I called her up and I said, you know, thank you for your time and thank you for contributing, but we're gonna go another way, and I'm gonna have to replace you. And she had all these excuses and everything, and I was like, I made my decision.
Yeah,
So
good for you. I mean, as a kid, that's a tough thing to do. I mean, as an adult, like
yeah,
I am conflict averse, so
yeah,
that is not something that I enjoy doing. I've had to do it in my professional career. I fortunately have not encountered that on set yet.
mhm,
But it's important, right, to be willing to make those hard choices, for the benefit of the film, for sure. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your VFX house, and um, you're working with Unreal Engine.
mhm,
Um, I'm kind of interested to get your perspective on sort of the future of that,
mhm,
especially when we look at, what is possible with AI today. But maybe
mhm.
we'll start with, how you come back and get into building your visual effects house.
Okay. Well, so my company's called Ronin Film, and you can go to the website roninfilm.com. And we started in 2012. Um, and the origin story of the company is real similar to ILM. George wanted to make a movie, wanted to create images from his imagination that he couldn't do with the visual effects houses that existed during that time, and so they had to invent, new ways of creating those images, and that was the birth of ILM. So Ronin Film is a very similar situation, although I didn't have 20th Century Fox behind me. But I was really interested in making a television pilot that was 80% CGI and, you know, shot with live action actors on a green screen, and then all the sets would be digital. And that was because I had written a script called The New Kind, which was a sci-fi action show that was set in a future America post economic collapse, and everything the infrastructure had been eliminated, so no running water, no electricity, vines covering McDonald's, and kind of gangs in the street. And um, I really like martial arts films, so I had this idea that in the future there's these like construction um, equipment that's like it's like a mech suit that's made out of this, like I call it nano alloy, which is
Mm,
like a very lightweight, thin but very strong and flexible metal. And you wear a backpack, and it will unfold like origami around the user, and and then you can program different martial arts um, disciplines, within the software of the suit, so that you could have any kind of kung fu mastery that you want. And so teenagers would like steal these suits, and they would battle it out, in the streets for like turf war. And so that was a sort of milieu. That was a concept that I wanted, and there's a love story in there as well. And so, but the world, doesn't exist, in my mind of how I wanted it to look. And so, the moon has a city on it, and it's like, there's all these images that I thought were really neat that I wanted to see. And, if I were to hire ILM to do it, it would be, millions of dollars. And, but what I had discovered is that, see, in 2012, the computing power of like normal regular computers had reached the level of ILM's computers, which were like $1 million computers. And when they did like um, the Jurassic Park movie, the Silicon Graphics workstation was $1 million computer, and the software program was $1 million a year license. And so they would need $1 million for each computer and $1 million per license. I mean, it was like rocket science.
crazy.
And so ILM and Digital Domain were like the only companies. There's a couple others, Santa Barbara Studios was one, but there was a very small amount of digital, animation houses that could do this type of photorealistic CGI. And so the software program called Maya, at the time, they had these free licenses for students, and so it had come down. It was still $20,000 per year, per suite for for each computer. And the computers, had come down, so they were reasonably affordable, and then these licenses were free. And so I realized, like, there's probably a lot of like community colleges out there, and that probably are teaching high-end Maya animation and photorealistic CGI. And so I just did a search one day on YouTube, like Maya show reel, 2012, and then like hundreds of these incredible student projects were coming up, and in all the disciplines. So like, if you know about how CGI works, there's like a modeler, they're like the sculptor. Then there's a rigger, and they take the model and make it the skeleton, so that it has a range of motion, right? It's like making a marionette or something. And
Yep.
then there's an animator, and so the animator's like a puppeteer. And then there's like painting it, and the whole the texture of it. It's like a whole other discipline. And then there's particle effects and things like that, and volumetric stuff like smoke and fire and things like that. That's another discipline. And then there's compositing, where you're taking so many different levels of layers of CGI and other elements, and then compositing them together. And there are all these disciplines, and there's a whole workflow that goes from one down to the next, and each team. And I had learned all this stuff from my, sort of teachers at ILM. So I understood how a VFX company works, but I just didn't have millions of dollars. But I realized that the internet had gone to the point where we could send files over the internet and we could collaborate through the internet. And so I started to reach out to all these students and ask them if they wanted to work. And then I knew all these guys at ILM. So I was like, hey, would you mind working on my show? You don't have to do anything. You just have to give notes to these
Mm.
artists who are like doing at a community college in Philadelphia or in Thailand or something like that, and or an art school in Boston. And so I had reached out through email, and through YouTube, and just saying, like, commenting like, hey, I love your reel, you're a great modeler, you're a great animator, you're a great
Yeah.
compositor, and I'm doing this show, and it's called The New Kind, and blah, blah. I pitched them like I'm pitching an investor, and I got hundreds, literally hundreds of artists to volunteer. And in exchange, what I did was I connected them with people who were working on Star Wars, or who were working on Avengers, or working on, Lord of the Rings or something like that. And they were getting like incredible mentorship and access to people who could possibly hire them. And many of the best people who worked on my show, who did this sort of exchange, and where I would introduce them to all these very high level Oscar award winning, VFX artists. They ended up getting hired, and then now I will go to a Star Wars movie, or I'll see something on television or something like that, and a big Marvel movie, and there they are. There's their name, and so, like, it was really gratifying to be able to give people their start, get them into the business, and
Yeah. What
now
a
they're like.
great opportunity.
So
Yeah.
that was the
Really cool.
birth of Ronin Film, and I did a Kickstarter. I raised $100,000, and was written up in Wired magazine, and a lot of other publications, and that kind of like that project was sort of the beginning of it. And then I got a call out of nowhere that they were making this giant spider movie, like a Sci-Fi Channel movie, and they wanted to know if I could, do those effects. And so I said, yeah, sure, I could do that. And then I ended up hiring a lot of those same guys, and we had our first job, so we did Lava Lantula, for Sci-Fi Channel, and then we did another movie that same year called Spiders 3D. And I'll never work on a 3D movie again. That was horrible. But but
So
yeah,
for Lavalantula, I hope I got that right.
yeah.
Um,
Steve Gutenberg is in it.
yeah, yeah. So
They made a couple of them.
was that still Maya,
Yeah,
as kind of primary tool that you were
yeah,
working
yeah. We were
with?
working with Maya and Nuke. Yeah, and we were
Okay.
working with all the same programs that Hollywood was making. The only difference is that we were using, newbies, and a combination of newbies and experienced people. And then, but the real thing that we were doing was we were crowdsourcing. So everyone who I was working with, I had never met in person, and so we were using online servers, and the major studios couldn't do that because of security issues. So like Disney and ILM and all those like big guys, they had to have everyone working in a physical location. Well, now
Mm.
all the visual effects houses do it exactly the way we did it. They
Yeah.
have their own encryption software and everything. But I didn't care. I was like, I actually posted everything on Facebook because I wanted people to know what we were doing, and I just wanted to kind of be open about it, and it also attracted a lot of people. People in the who were great artists would follow our progress and be like, "Hey, can I do something? I want to make a robot," or whatever it is, so that was really a fun. It was building a community.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about the Gods of Mars project. I know that that is something that is very heavy VFX. Like,
Mm.
I've seen the trailer. I've seen some of the documentary work. I believe that that was done through a grant
Yeah, yeah,
from Epic Games. So tell me a little bit
yeah.
about how that came about.
So I was this was like kind of out of the blue. I got a call from a friend of mine. He said that he knew of a producer who had a script, called Gods of Mars, that it was not based on the book. It was a totally different original screenplay, and he was looking for a director, and so I interviewed, I showed my reel, and I got hired, and so part of what I to get hired, I basically said, look, I can do all the visual effects with my visual effects company, and we can do it at a fraction of the cost of anyone else, which is true. And so I had been experimenting with the Unreal Engine at that time, which had recently, this was 5 years ago, but it had recently made some advances similar to my little Maya story. It's like the computing power, like the graphics cards, they just keep getting better and better. And it had reached a level that I finally, it had reached a level where it was like, everything looked like a video game with the Unreal Engine up until about 5 years ago. And then just the ability for the computing power to sort of that get to that quality level. Because the Unreal Engine is made for gaming, it's not made for visual effects. But it had gotten to the point where it was about as good as Maya if you knew what you were doing. And so I was like shocked because it was free, and it also could do things Maya couldn't do. There's a lot of things that Unreal Engine has that's way better than Maya, and it's very sort of like base programming works completely differently, in which you don't need a render farm. So the render farm is something like when I was working on those other projects, when I was working in Maya, when it's time to render, we would need to rent a render farm, which is a huge room filled with computers.
Yeah.
And that render farm, like if I had a really long shot, like I had this opening shot that was 3 minutes long. So it was 3 minutes of 4K, eight, CGI animation. And it took a week. It took 7 days to render. And then
Sounds about right. Yeah.
it cost $900. And then, it didn't look good. So I had to do it
Oh,
again, and that was painful, really painful. And so I don't have another job. Like I don't have another career. So like my life has been like this, like feast or famine. Like I direct a commercial, like I direct a Super Bowl commercial. It's like great, I could live for a whole year, and then after that I'm broke. If I don't get another, because I've been unemployed for a year before. Often, like it will be like a whole year or 6 months with no job, and now it's even worse. With the way the business is working, or the way the business isn't working. But every one of my friends in LA, I live in Texas, but when I lived in LA, and I have a lot of friends still in LA, I mean, they're all out of work, all of them,
yeah.
100% of them. And so, they're talking about selling their houses or moving, changing careers. I mean, it's really like an apocalypse, but
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
mm,
You told me, I would say a year, maybe a year and a half ago, Hollywood is dying. I was like, well, that's bad news, right? Not even just Hollywood, but the movie industry in a lot of ways, and certainly, the theaters
mm,
are on the decline for sure. Um, and but you also said that presents an opportunity for indie filmmakers.
it
So
does. Yeah.
I'd just like you to share a little bit about your perspective on the landscape for indie filmmakers right
Yeah.
now.
Well, one of the reasons I left LA was because I could see that the business was going to end. And, I've been kind of like telling people, like anyone who would listen for so long, and, most people were like, it'll come back. It always comes back, and it's like, no, it's like, it didn't come back for Detroit, I mean, and there are fundamental reasons why that town went bankrupt, and the way the whole industry, certain locations are built on industry, right? And it could be a crop, it could be like agriculture, and then that goes away because of weather changes or whatever, and so the film industry is, Hollywood is a factory town, and it was built as a factory town, um, because the fundamentals of filmmaking are very expensive. Just like building a car, not everyone can build a car. And a movie is a similar thing. So it's all based on the fundamentals of film, literal film, which is 35 millimeter film, which is made out of granulated silver. And they call it the silver screen because it is literally a precious metal. So, at its height, it's about $100 a minute for film. And now it's digital, which is great. I'm not saying I don't love film. Film is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I love Ferraris too, and they're expensive. And everyone who works on a Ferrari gets a lot of money because a Ferrari is a very high end ticket item, and there's not that many of them. And so people who have the ability to master a skill with a piece of equipment that is a very high end, high ticket item is going to be getting paid a lot of money because there's not a lot of people who know that expertise, right? So similar to a cinematographer, an editor, a composer, and a screenwriter, an actor, the people who are the best in Hollywood are basic. Everything's sort of based on the idea that silver is expensive. You don't use every minute of film. You only use a portion of all the film that you use, so that's expensive. Cameras are about $100,000. Lenses are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars too. So it's like, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just for the equipment to make a movie. The editing systems have before today. I mean, they've been hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mixing facilities, $1 million facility that you'd have to rent by the hour, and scoring. You'd have the the orchestra. You might have to fly to London or somewhere. I mean, the to make a movie, the kind of high end movies that we're used to enjoying, that quality is millions and millions of dollars. And so you have to have a lot of money. You have to be a movie studio essentially. And the way that they created their factory system is that they understand that most movies fail. And that's something that people don't know, that most movies fail. The majority of movies that are made fail. They do not make their money back. But if you make 200 movies a year, there's going to be a handful that are not only profitable, but are cultural markers that live forever in the consciousness of the world. And so, but you have to make a lot of them, and because most of them will suck, because it's art, and not all art is good. And so it's the most expensive art form in the history of humanity, and and most of it sucks. And so just like going to Vegas, if you go to Vegas, you better bring more than just a dollar, because if you just bring a dollar, you put the dollar in the slot machine, you have one chance to make something back, but if you bring $1,000, you have 1,000 chances. So you get more chances to win. And so a lot of movie making is gambling, and it's a scientific kind of gambling. But movies cost a lot of money, and they change, and over time, different technologies come in and change the economy of it. And certain technologies like home video, videotape, and cable television um, boosted the economy and made it grow. So 2/3 of the revenue. So when home video, when videotapes were very common and people were buying videotapes or DVD, but they were buying physical media for the most part, before streaming came along. You had cable television. People watch movies on TV and they watch regular content on television, and they would pay for it, and they would pay handsomely for it, and they would pay handsomely for videotapes. So videotapes and DVDs, I mean, they would, at their prime, 70, $80 for a video cassette. And so a lot of people rented videos, but still there's video stores buying, that those very high ticket items and then renting them out. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so streaming doesn't make even just a fraction. It makes a fraction of what home video used to make for the industry and cable television. So it's almost like the business was a tripod, right? So theatrical is one leg, and then home video is the other leg, and then cable television is the other leg. And you could
Yep.
literally make billions of dollars, more money definitely by cable licensing your show or your movie on television channels, literally thousands of television channels domestically and internationally, and you could make money indefinitely, and with home video as well, just tons. They were printing money. So that was when that was happening, when that was the business model in Hollywood. Hollywood was making a bank, right? There was a lot of work, there was a lot of money being made, and it was an economy that was functional. And when we recently lost physical media and cable television at the same time and replaced it with this streaming platform, the streaming business, which makes a fraction of the amount of money that those two used to make. All of a sudden, it's like you lose two tripod legs, and you're just like hopping up and down, on a pogo stick, and eventually you're going to fall over. And we are now in mid fall, right? It's everything is kind of collapsing, and you can see it by the frequency of movies that are being put into movie theaters. So when you make a movie, it costs a lot of money, but then you have to pay, right? People are starting to figure this out. You have to pay, a certain amount of money for advertising, right? Minimum $5 million per movie if it's theatrical with a wide release. Even if you're just doing streaming online ads, it's a minimum of $5 million that these guys are spending for
Yeah,
a wide
it's
release.
a substantial percentage of the budget of the film, right? A Hollywood
Sure,
film
even if a movie
goes
costs five
into.
dollars, yeah, if a movie costs $5, it's still $5 million you're going to have to spend on advertising if it's going to have a theatrical release. Then you split it 50-50 with the theater owners. So you're going to make whatever you're making half of that. So you better make many times that. So in the past, they would release a movie in theaters. Most of them would fail because most movies fail. And then the home video and cable internationally would cover the costs. So they wouldn't lose money. They just would make less money.
Yeah.
So right now, Hollywood studios are experiencing something they haven't experienced really ever before, which is a movie fails at the box office and it totally sends shockwaves through the organization. And these studios are no longer just movie studios. They're also television studios. If people are watching less television, it's less money revenue coming in to finance the feature film part of it. So television and movies are really the same entities. And they're also, a lot of them are technology companies. So like the companies that are sort of surviving are the companies that don't really survive really. They don't really need the television and feature film part of the equation like Amazon or Apple, that they're this is almost like a loss leader for them. But companies.
It is. It's an add-on, right?
Right.
Like
Right. But if your whole
they're
business is that, and you've lost 2/3 of your revenue, and so the only thing you can do to balance the books is lay people off, and that's what they've done. And if you drive around in LA, every time I go to LA to visit or for business or whatever, I see more and more of these businesses. These, like, I couldn't believe I was driving down Barham right by Warner Brothers, and there's this building that Warner Brothers owned, and it's not in the lot. It's like you're cutting through the lots on the right hand side, and there's this gigantic building. And they used to have this huge building, a huge side of the building with no windows, and that's where they would have like their big, whatever Warner Brothers big movie was at that time would be like right there, and a
okay.
gigantic, oversized, movie poster. And it was just gone. There's no movie poster there. And then in the windows where I'd see all these people working their jobs and everything, and just empty office space. And there's so many of these large offices. You can just see it, driving around LA, just empty office buildings. You go into the lot, the Universal or Paramount, and these back lots where they used to be making movies and TV shows, and they're no longer doing those anymore. So they're empty. And people who have the office space are like not even in the entertainment business. A lot of times they're like AT&T or some other, and they're using these backlots for like, you know, bar mitzvahs and things like that. It's I'm not kidding. That's really what they're being used for. And it's just interesting to see. But if you do the math, I mean, if you look and see how many movies last year had a wide release in theaters? Just count them, you know? And so it was like I started to realize by just literally counting, because the news doesn't cover this for some reason. Um, but the when I was a kid, up until very recently, there was 5 movies a week. There was 5 movies to choose from, right? From my 5 major studios, where they're all release a movie a week. And so there'd be like an action movie and a comedy and a romance and a period movie and a slapstick comedy, horror, all these things, would be available, and you could choose between 5 movies. And at the end of the week, a lot of them would be clear that they'd be gone pretty soon. They'd at least get 2 weeks, but some movies would play throughout the summer. But there was a ton of content. I hate that word, but a ton of movies to choose from. And now there's really like 1 or 2 movies a week. And people go, well, it's COVID, or it's the strikes, and it's like it's got nothing to do with it. I mean, it has something to do with it, but I mean, most of it has to do with the fact that 95% of all video watched on the internet is called UGC, which is home movies, right? User generated um, content.
Mhm.
And so there's only so many minutes in the day, right? It's a finite amount of time. People don't go to a television as much as anymore. They're on their phones or watching content on their phones, and it's the moving picture. Whether you call it TV or videos or movies, it's the moving picture, and they're watching the moving picture on an iPhone or a Samsung or whatever, but they're taking it with them throughout the day. So they're watching video in the car, at the gym, on the toilet, in the kitchen, on the bus. Places that no one would watch the moving image before are now watching the moving image constantly. And most of it is UGC, because there's a lot of UGC, and the cinematic grammar, or the cinematic vocabulary, um, that once was really rare. You'd have to go to film school, or you'd have to be trained by professionals to understand the language of cinema, right? Close up, wide shot, transition, music, editing, all of that kind of stuff to create a dynamic story with the moving picture. Very rare, very expensive. Not a lot of people know how to do it. Now, everyone knows how to do it. Not everyone, but way more people are understanding how to edit, like how to edit video. Like, that's remarkable. Everyone has an editing program on their iPhone. They can learn how to edit on their iPhone.
Yeah, I mean,
Shooting, compose.
sorry, at this
Mhm.
point, they don't even need to know how to edit, right? Like,
Right.
with
The AI will do it
the
for them.
AI will do it for you and do a good job. So, um,
So that's affecting, so here's the thing. It's like, if it's very simple. You can boil it down to this. If there were 5 candy companies in the world, and they made all the candy, right, and they charged $1 per candy bar, right, and everyone if when you wanted candy, you have to go buy one of 5 companies would offer that candy. And those candy companies, although competitive, basically, the people who would work at those candy companies sort of rotate between those 5 companies, and it was a healthy kind of ecosystem within those 5 companies, right? And so, how long do you think those 5 companies could survive, when all of a sudden one day, magically, everyone can make their own candy, and they're giving the candy to each other, right? So and for free, free candy. And so what we're doing right now is replacing somebody watching an episode of Entertainment Tonight, or whatever what would be, you know so, and we're not spending any money on it, right? We're not getting paid for it either, but we're not spending any money on it, and a very limited cost to what we're doing. But I don't know, we're on almost an hour now. That would be an hour-long show on television. How many hundreds of, maybe 1,000 people are getting paid to create something similar to this, right? To an hour long interview show that would live somewhere on a television network, And there would be app people who would be buying advertising against it, and there would be people selling advertising against it, and the whole and satellites and people in offices, and then the crew and cameramen and sound people and editors and the executives, and then the agents who would negotiate for everybody on that side of things, and lots of deals and contracts and lawyers and lots of money changing hands to make the competition of what we're doing right now for nothing. So, of course, there's a gigantic, implication to having your competition produce something. Maybe it's not as good, but that it doesn't really matter because maybe we're providing a television. This is a very niche conversation that we're having. It's not a wide audience kind of thing, but we're taking people who would normally be watching a mainstream thing and being sort of okay with that information. They're not getting this type of granular kind of specific information, right?
Yep.
But that there's a group of people that are now watching this instead of something else. And so because of that, we're drawing all those eyeballs. That those eyeballs would normally be paying, and there'd be transactions happening and funding that show that's being broadcast. So that's happening at a very accelerated rate, and it's killing. Like our podcast right now is just a little jab and a little bit of it into the heart of the business, just taking a little bit away, eyeballs, money, a little bit away, and this gigantic monster that's sort of kind of lumbering along, that's sort of like operating on phantom power right now. The whole industry is operating on phantom power.
So that's all very encouraging news. um, but there is an opportunity there for indie filmmakers, kind of
Oh yeah, I mean that's the
within the
reason why I'm on
landscape.
tour. I wouldn't have gone on tour if I hadn't done the math and figured out, oh, wait a second, like uh the movie theaters are in business. Normally they'd be getting 5 movies a week. Now they're getting 1, 2 movies a week. There have dozens of screens of auditoriums that are empty, and like they're all playing Wicked. And there's like 5 people in each screening room. It's like, give me one of them. I got a movie, and so I ended up pitching movie theaters, and remarkably, getting a warm reception. And it was like, I'll do the marketing. I'll give you the DCP. The DCP is the same format you're getting from Hollywood. My movie's 4K, 5.1 Dolby surround sound, just like Hollywood. It's just as entertaining, if not more entertaining, than the movies you're getting from Hollywood. And I'll give you a 50-50 split, which is better than Hollywood. And so, a lot of them would say, absolutely. The only problem is I would only have Monday through Thursday. I wouldn't get a weekend screening because those are reserved for the major studios. But now it's changing. I'm about to go on tour at a movie theater chain that is giving me Fridays and Saturdays.
Nice.
And so
Okay.
I've kind of earned my way there, but they're also like very progressive in what they're doing. So first
Yeah.
run movie theater. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that math that you did, right? Because I think a lot of indie filmmakers would like, right, to get their film in the theater. Your film is a
Hmm.
very quality film, right? I think that's an important thing that shouldn't be ignored. But
Yeah.
what led you
Yeah.
to believe, hey, this could be profitable? What was the approach?
Well, I last year I was living in San Marcos, Texas, right next to this the Texas State University,
Yep.
and I was invited to screen my film um, at their on campus. They have a big auditorium, fits like 300 people or something like that, and so I decided I would do a test screening just to see, you know, if what people thought of the film. And so I did some marketing and did the screening, and I had 250 people show up, and and they loved the movie. And I watched the audience watch the movie, and a lot of the audience members were watching the movie like with their seat, with their backs not touching the seat, like literally leaning forward. And they weren't fidgeting, they weren't walking out. They were laughing at the spots that were funny, and they were gasping at the scary parts, and they were really engaged in the film. And so I that screening was like told me that I think I should probably see if I can do this again, someplace, someplace that's different outside of Texas and a totally different audience. And so I planned a tour, and I found theaters in Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, and Georgia, and Iowa. um, Totally different communities, different audiences, and I was experimenting with different marketing techniques and recording the results. And what I found was people really loved the film, and so um, I just was recording a lot of my journeys doing the tour. And then I also realized that I might be onto something that could help save the independent film movement. And because watching a movie in the theater is a profound experience. It's totally different than watching it at home, even if you have a nice system. Because when you're in charge of your movie watching experience, you're going to look at your phone, you're going to pause it, you're going to take a break, make a sandwich, go to the bathroom. Maybe you watch it in pieces over a few days or something like that. And you're not going to have the same experience if it's just one, you know, long movie that you watch in order, and that you don't look down at your phone. You're just totally paying attention to the film. And then the other component, which I think is just as important, is an audience. So having an experience, when everyone's heart is racing and where everyone is laughing at the same time, and there's this group vibration that's happening. It's a real thing, and you feel it. You feel everyone's hair goes up on the back of their necks. Everyone feels that at the same time. There's something profound about that. It's like going on a roller coaster. Like if you go to a roller coaster alone, you're gonna have a different experience than 100 people on this big train going on doing loop de loops and stuff like that. It's there's a group experience. You're having it all together, and there's nothing that can duplicate that. You can't duplicate it. You have to. It's a group experience, or it's not a group experience. And especially a movie that really moves you, that really affects you, to have that in all together, and you remember it. It's an indelible memory that you take with you. So it's an experience. It's a ritual. You're going out of your house. You've planned the time you're going to go to it, right? You buy your ticket, you buy your popcorn, you pick your seat. There's logistics that go into it. And then you put away your phone, and then it's a dark room, and you're with strangers, and you have this experience. It's such an important community experience. It's a communal experience to have. And as a filmmaker, that's what I want for people to experience. I don't want people to watch my movie on the toilet, with their iPhone. I'm glad people have access to the moving picture all the time, but I think that there needs to be a place to have a holy experience, to have a sacred experience, something that's special, that you submit to it instead of you controlling it. So I think it's something that's very special, the cinema experience. And I became addicted to it. So as a filmmaker, this is what you want. You want to have your movie seen in theaters, and to be able to be in first run movie theaters, not like an art house or a museum or something, but like a regular multiplex where it's like, you know, right next door is Transformers One, and like the other right next door is, you know, you know, the Avengers or whatever. And it's like to have that, you know, to be in that grouping, it's so special. It's so exciting, and it's very rewarding when people love your film. So I worked really hard on the film. It took 7 years to make, and I put my heart and soul in it. I think this is the best thing I've ever done, and it's incredibly rewarding when people love the film. People come up to me and want my autograph and tell me this is the best movie they've ever seen. I've heard that. It's like, wow, what an incredible high. But I'm here to entertain people. I want to entertain people in the theater, and it's a that alone, just that is like just the service of doing that is extremely rewarding. So I've been around 10 states now, and I'm now planning another tour starting in August. So there's going to be a screening in Look Cinemas in the Fort Worth area, and then I'm going to move on to California and parts unknown.
Well, congratulations on the success with the tour so far. For other indie filmmakers who have a good film
I
and would
teach a
like,
master class. I teach a master class, by the way. So on how to do this for a filmmaker who wants to put their movie in theaters and go on a roadshow, a
yeah,
cinema roadshow. It's called cineroadshow.com.
okay,
And if you go to cineroadshow.com, you can register for the newsletter. And then we also have an event. So if you go to cineroadshow.com/event, on July 5th, 2025, we're going to be doing a roundtable discussion with a bunch of filmmakers who are currently on tour with their films and across America, and they're booking their own movies. And some of them are students who've taken the master class, and some of them are just doing it on their own. And we're comparing notes and sharing our experience with each other and also an audience. So it'll be a Zoom live online event.
awesome. That sounds like it will be very informative. So recommend everybody who's looking to get their film out into theaters. Yeah, go
And then
take
the
a look.
occult, my film, The Occult, is theoccultmovie.com. And you can follow the tour and you know come to a show if it's coming to your area.
Yeah, awesome.
Eventually, eventually I want to do all 50 states. And also, the road show is sort of like stage one for my plan for the film, is that it's not available on streaming, it's not available on home video. I want to take whatever time that it's going to take to get the word out, let people see the film, create a word of mouth. I've already got good reviews and people talking about it on Letterboxd and things like that, but basically build a reputation around the film, and also consistently have a good box office. And so far we've done really well, and I would like to impress an investor to pay for a wide release. So if I just consistently do great box office for my one little screening, sometimes I'll have a Thursday night and a Friday night. Sometimes it's just a Wednesday night or whatever it is. It's just a one screening
Yeah.
with me there, doing a Q&A afterwards. But eventually I want to be able to release the film in as many screens as possible. And so the whole theory and the whole mission is, proving that this movie can be successful if there's a decent, P&A budget. And so eventually, if I have a decent P&A budget, like $5 million, then I can release it, to 2,000 screens or something like that, a wide release without a distributor, which I think is the future of our industry.
Yeah, Peter. So wrapping it up, what is your one best piece of advice to indie filmmakers who want to make a feature film?
Well, I just do it, I mean, I mean, there's nothing really stopping you to make a film. You can make a movie on your iPod, iPhone. You can edit on your iPhone. It used to be all about the equipment. The first thing people would say, like, what kind of camera are you using? Like, what's your budget, and people still ask that, but it's like, um yeah, I made the occult on pretty much nothing. I mean, it did cost. When I got to the end, I did pay for music and my film composer and my sound design and all that, but actual production itself, no one got paid. I mean, everyone volunteered. I got all the locations for free. I mean, I paid for food, but to feed everybody, but there wasn't really a lot of costs. I think ultimately, if you think about film as an art form, which it is, if you learn how to draw, your first portraits of someone are not going to look anything like that person. But you have to do lots and lots of drawings, lots and lots of portraits in order to get to that point where you can totally capture that person's essence, and when you can get to that point where you can draw, a perfect, um, when people look at it and go, oh yeah, that's Mabry you just drew right there, and when you can capture the essence of someone's physical and soul, and also have your own creative, you know, spark on top of it, right? And then you're a real artist, right? And you get to that point where you're a good artist, like undeniably good. And so that's the same way with filmmaking. You can't just make a first film and expect it to be awesome, just like you can't just draw a portrait of someone never having drawn a portrait before and expect to have the likeness be perfect, and then also the technique is awesome and everything. It's like there's only one way of doing that. And when all of my mentors have, they're all masters of their craft, and the one thing that is the consistent thing that they've all taught me is that you have to be totally obsessed, and you have to repeat the process over and over and over. Like the difference between a good painting and a bad painting is not giving up until it's awesome. Because people who are not good artists, they'll be like, that's good enough. It's like, is it really? Like, how many thousands of hours did you spend on it? So you have to be a perfectionist, and you have to keep going over and over and over, and you have to be willing to fail. And you have to do lots of bad art before you get to the good art. You have to make a lot of bad movies before you get to the good movies. And fortunately, when I was younger, I mean, I was shooting on actual film. I was shooting on 16 millimeter film. That was expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
even shooting on video, we shot on 3/4 inch videotape. The tapes were expensive. The cameras were hard to get. Like, everything was hard to get. Like,
Yeah.
everything was difficult and everything was expensive. And as much as I had a lot of connections growing up, but I was not a rich kid. So I didn't have access to a lot of money. I knew rich people, and, I got that $30,000 grant and things like that. But, it's a lot of eating ramen and just, like, not being able to take a girl on a date because you're poor. And those are the sacrifices that you make. But then you just put more time into your craft. And so the people who are good are not, like, talented. Like, I don't believe that. The only reason why I got to be a professional is because I'm, like, obsessed, and I and I put thousands of hours into my craft, and I'm interested in it. I love it, so it motivates me. It's not work for me. It's not like, oh, I gotta go write another script, or I gotta go watch this other movie, or it's like, I'd watch a movie, I would really like it, I would go and read the biography of that filmmaker, and then read all the biographies of that filmmaker, and then watch every film that guy made in the order that he made them, and then try to go and read articles and totally figure out someone's career, or someone's creative evolution, or their motivation. Like, that is like this insatiable hunger for knowledge, and to master your craft. So there's no short answer. That's my long answer. But I think that what's wonderful is that the hardest things that kind of keep you from being a filmmaker have just evaporated over the last couple of years. So you can go make a movie on your iPhone. You don't need money. You don't need equipment. You can create a work of art that lasts for the ages. And if you're really clever, you can figure out a way of making money from it, and then, paying your bills and having a family, and, you know surviving off of your art, which is ultimately the goal.
That is the goal. Well, that seems like a good place to leave it, Peter. Thank you so much for coming on the Texas Indie Film Podcast and
Thank you.
sharing
Pleasure to be
your
here.
knowledge and experience. Really appreciate it. Um, I am Rob Mabry, host of Texas Indie Film Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. That's it for this week's episode of the Texas Indie Film Podcast. Don't forget to follow, like, and comment. And if you're a filmmaker from the Lone Star State, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, contact Texas Indie Film on Facebook, Instagram, or email at texasindiefilm@gmail.com.